My name is Corinne Consolini, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Pharmacy Practice at the USJ School of Pharmacy and Physician Assistant Studies. Welcome to my +1 UDL solution story, Questions About Questions. The course that I've been focusing my UDL lens on is Pharmacy 706, Communication Skills. I've taught this course every fall for the past 6 years, and it's time for a refresh. UDL guidelines will help me to be thoughtful with any changes I make to the course for the next cohort. Pharmacy 706 is a course on communication skills for pharmacy students in their first semester of the program. This course is situated very early in the curriculum, just as students are settling into their new roles as Doctor of Pharmacy candidates. They will grow immensely in these roles over 3 intense years, at the end of which they'll graduate as practice-ready, compassionate pharmacists prepared to work in hospitals and community pharmacies. Communication skills is a foundational course, focusing on interprofessional communication to help students develop active listening and effective patient interviewing skills. These are skills that are integral to the profession of pharmacy. To effectively counsel a patient, students need to learn how to identify and use several different types or styles of questions. We use open versus closed-ended questions, show and tell versus prime questions, which are both used during different types of medication teaching, and probing questions. Each of these are defined and used in this course. Students need to be able to identify and use each type of question and differentiate between them on the exam. They must also be able to identify appropriate or inappropriate scenarios to utilize each type of question. Students are also introduced to the definition of a leading question. These are questions that are most often associated with the way lawyers ask questions of a witness, or at least that's the way it looks in movies. These questions directly lead the respondent to one desired answer. Pharmacists may find themselves using this style of question if they have an assumption regarding the response they'll receive, or if they're anticipating only one specific response. Pharmacists should actively try not to use this style of questioning. Our goal as pharmacists is to ask questions that allow for authentic and open responses, most often by using open-ended questions strategically throughout medication teaching sessions. Even with the best of intentions, it's very easy to fall into a pattern of using leading questions, and pharmacists need to consciously avoid this pattern. I found myself doing this just this week as I've been giving COVID vaccinations to our healthcare providers. Each patient that I see needs to be asked several screening questions. One example is, have you received a previous dose of the COVID vaccine? Most have not, seeing as we just started immunizing. I heard myself asking, this is your first dose, right? This is a clearly leading question because my assumption was that I already knew the answer. I heard myself doing this and I changed my tune very quickly. In class, the topic of questions is presented in a PowerPoint lecture format with structured examples. All of the information is on the slide and we move through it pretty quickly. There's very little discussion that comes from this. The class sometimes appears to be unengaged. The material is straightforward and students don't seem particularly interested in why it's important. Put simply, they don't ask very many questions about questions. On the exam, there's 2 or 3 multiple choice questions that are either directly tied to this topic or it's used as a distractor. The fall 2020 cohort struggled with one particular exam question. Only 45% of the class correctly identified an appropriately used closed-ended question. So why is this important? Because most of these students incorrectly labeled this question as leading, and several of them were pretty upset about it in our post-exam review. So much so that I had to shut down the discussion so we could move on to other topics, leaving my students feeling frustrated and not particularly happy with me. As I reflected on this post-exam struggle, I realized that we had an eerily similar situation that occurred with the 2019 cohort. To be honest, I've known there was a learning barrier here for several years, and I've tried to address it by adding more examples to the lecture, but it's now obvious that my efforts haven't helped enough. Learning about UDL has given me a brand new perspective. By using a UDL lens, the learning barriers I've identified include too much lecture, inauthentic examples, and no opportunities to practice. To address these barriers, I focused on a few UDL guidelines and checkpoints to help me develop my +1 solutions. Here's what I've come up with. First, using checkpoints 1.2 and 1.3 offer alternatives for auditory and visual information. I plan to use video or audio clips to show conversational examples. I'd like to have students watch or listen to a short clip, followed by think, pair, share, to identify the different types of questions in the example. This could be repeated with several short clips, with examples that make sense to students, to allow them to listen to how these questions are phrased and used in real-life conversations. I'll include captions for all audio to give the option for reading instead of listening. If this is successful, students will have multiple means of representation for a topic that they often struggle with. Next, I want to tackle the barrier of not having opportunities to practice. To overcome this barrier, I'll plan a breakout activity for students to work in pairs to act out a scenario using their own words to ask each style of question. I'll check in with each group and ask for volunteers to present their conversation to the class. The remainder of the class can then provide additional feedback on the use of each question style. This activity utilizes checkpoint 7.2, optimize relevance, value, and authenticity, and checkpoint 8.3, foster collaboration and community. By allowing time and opportunities for authentic examples and practice, I hope to engage deeper learning and be able to elicit students to ask more questions about questions. If I'm successful, students will understand the importance of the topic and feel less frustrated with tough exam questions. Finally, a quick thank you to the inaugural St. Joe's UDL cohort and to Diana, our fearless leader. It's been really fun getting to know all of you, and I hope that we can keep connecting and collaborating in the future.